Okay, welcome back. So we went on some crazy tangents in the first part of this show. Jake, what we need to talk about something serious. What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, speaking of having difficulty obtaining planes.
Nice link, go on.
Yeah, thank you. No, Rex. Link is a different airline entirely.
Yeah.
We're talking about Rex. We spoke last week to Alan Milne, who is the CEO of SkyTrans, sort of a rival regional airline to Rex, operating up in Queensland. You may recall earlier this year they were bought out by Aviation Group. Their first A319 should be arriving in the country soon for wet leasing. Anyway, CEO of SkyTrans, Alan Milne, basically said that he thinks that Rex's aging fleet is kind of an anchor on the company. It's sort of dragging down... or it will make it difficult or more difficult for Rex's administrators, EY Australia, to find a buyer. These Saab 340s, we've talked about this a fair bit. They're around 30 years old on average. And so I don't think Saab makes them anymore. It's hard to get parts. Rex might be having to cannibalize, grounded planes to find parts for the planes that are still in the air. They're sort of old rattle traps. And anyone who bought Rex would have to refresh the fleet.
But this is the issue. So one of the issues we had with Bonza, and the reason no buyers came in, was because they were an airline without aircraft, because their aircraft were leased and they lost them. So what do you buy?
The only things that they had going for them was their routes, their AOC,
their air operator certificate, basically their license to do it. So in a sense, Rex sort of has a similar problem, and they do have a fleet of aircraft. Some of them are grounded. They're all very, very old. Alan Joyce once, in slightly defamatory, mocked Rex and said the propellers were literally falling off the aircraft. They're not literally falling off, by the way, Alan, if you are listening. But he was making the point that they are very, very old. Now, there's an element that you interview the CEO of SkyTrans, right? He would say that. He would say that because... it looks like, we don't know for sure, but it looks like the administrator is struggling to find a buyer. Certainly, it's been, 3-4 months now?
Yeah, it's been a few months.
It's been a few months. No buyers appear to have emerged, or certainly no deal has been done. It does seem obvious that this old fleet is one of the roadblocks to this. Now, the two options that seem to be on the table is that, firstly, these routes are necessary. For these regional towns, they need to have them. They need them for tourism purposes, and they also need it so that business people from those towns can fly into the city to do deals and fly back.
Someone can go to the hospital in the city or visit friends and family.
Yeah, so these flights cannot stop. They are absolutely necessary for Australia to function. Particularly as well as with COVID, a lot of people moved out of the cities and moved to the regions.
Yeah.
So the two options, it seems to me, if they can't find a buyer, are one, the government needs to come in and give them some money or take over control. The other option would be that other kind of smaller airlines step in to take those routes. Which is essentially the idea that they're floating, that don't necessarily think that if Rex completely go under, that's it. There are people willing to come in and do this.
Yeah, I mean, you've got small carriers all across the country that, kind of have their own respective patches. I mean, you've got SkyTrans up in Queensland. You've got Hinterland Aviation up in far north Queensland. Sharp Airlines down in Victoria. Link Airways and Fly Pelican in New South Wales. Nexus over in WA. Airlink as well, I think, is based out of Essendon. You've got all these, smaller regional carriers that could conceivably step up and take over some of Rex's capacity.
The issue is, I suppose, if you're, say, SkyTrans or one of their rivals, is that why would you go and buy Rex and buy all of those old aircraft and buy all of the financial obligations when you can kind of wait for it to go under and then just move into those routes yourself? Obviously, that therefore puts everybody in a slightly tricky situation. So presumably the administrator, the government are going to have to decide at some point what is the best course of action. The other option, the other thing here is that obviously those other smaller rivals will obviously rush to go into the most lucrative routes. They may not want to necessarily go into the routes which aren't as lucrative but are necessary.
Yeah.
So the whole thing's a bit of a mess.
Well, Sharp Airlines down in Victoria has already said it could, put on more flights to King Island. SkyTrans has before stepped up to fill a gap that Rex left behind. So this was Cairns to Bamaga, I think, last year. And Alan Milne said, Rex pulled out of it. We jumped in as quick as we could just to make sure that Bamaga still had an air service. He said, quote, "The point we're trying to make is that there is a lot of capability to provide capacity if needed." He said, "If there's opportunity there, I'm absolutely 100% confident that will be filled. How quickly we can all do that, that's going to come down to how quickly we can introduce new aircraft. So purchasing or leasing, there'd be a financial burden there, but these airlines could conceivably step in if Rex goes to the great airport in the sky.
The great airport. I also
most airports are on the ground, but the great airport in the sky would be difficult to land at, you'd think.
Yes, no, right. But I also wouldn't necessarily write off somehow Rex continuing in some form, because you've got to understand that you had Lim King High, he for the majority of the life was the chairman, and then you had John Sharp, who was the deputy chairman, though in reality John Sharp was running the show. He was the front man. In the last couple of months, he was, because of all of the faff behind the scenes, he becomes chairman. He was doing that job for 15, 20 years, a hell of a long time. He's been on the show a couple of times. I would suggest, without being funny, John Sharp probably didn't need the money. I reckon he made quite a lot of money in his career, senior government positions, his finger in many pies. I got the impression he just loved it. He loved Rex. He loved being involved in that aviation community. They also have a lot of people at Rex that do know what they're doing, that love that airline, that know what makes it tick. You would like to think that if Rex were to survive, there could be a role for those people and the unique knowledge they have. Obviously, they're in a bit of a mess of a situation. But whatever happens, this needs to be resolved shortly, because at the moment, the government is effectively underwriting the flights if they are to not happen. They're saying if you book the flights and somehow Rex goes bust, we will reimburse you. But this kind of holding pattern that they're in cannot carry on forever. So at some point, someone's got to make a decision. Well, this looks like just being kicked down the road. The can's being kicked down the road. Rant over. Right, what are we talking about next, Jake?
Well, Adam, we spoke a bit before about Virgin, and apparently they've had a bit of a jump in their earnings for during the last full financial year.
Yeah.
You did this story.
Oh, God, I'm trying to bring it up now, aren't I? Oh, God, can you just say something funny and I'll find it? Just
something
say,
funny and I'll find it.
We can't have dead air. So basically, it's fine for the video, but for the people doing old school, I'm just rambling now.
Just
so unprofessional.
Listening to audio on Spotify like cavemen.
Here we go. This will be beautifully written. Why is it loading? Why is it? Right. So effectively, because Virgin Australia is not on the ASX right now, it is a private company. It doesn't necessarily have to publicly publish its accounts. What they did say, I think, in the first kind of release they sent out was that the earnings had jumped by a fifth to $519 million in the last full financial year. Not the kind of money that Qantas would make, but still looks very impressive. I think what we understood from subsequent reports is they also did make a pretty hefty profit too that was more impressive than their first full year post-administration. What it does seem to point to, though, is, and we said this before, what a good job Jane Hulliker has done. Now, she announced that she was resigning, I think it was back in February, and there's different versions of event as to whether she was pushed or whether she truly left of her own accord. We don't know. But it does seem quite extraordinary that whatever it is, 8 or 9 months, she is still there. I think I said before, my snout's on the ground, bedded deep within Virgin Australia, tell me that she is working as hard as ever. She does seem to have done a very, very good job here, because this airline was losing billions of dollars. I think when they went into administration, it was like 8 or 9 billion, a hell of a lot of money. She's taken that airline out of administration. She's given them an entire new strategy. They are making money. They have got a lot of orders for 737 Maxes on the way. Obviously, that's a bit of an issue, but that's not their fault. They seem to have rebuilt the thing. They're making money. I mean, if I were the Bain Capital, the effectively what will be owners of 75%, if I were Qatar Airways, I'd be looking at this and going, maybe we should get her to change your mind. I know when Alex Ferguson was going to leave Man United at one point, he changed his mind. Very different. One's a football team, one's an airline. But I would be looking at this and saying,
Threw you under a sky bus at Melbourne Airport.
Nice. Right.